I am so conservative,
Rationalized in my head. These are things I read in
and
the
I'm going to talk about
scriptures.
Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had invited.
Remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. I am so conservative. And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative, I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warning to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. Today, Barbara Pement joins us to discuss compassion, ministering to hurt and angry church folks. I like that. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby himself.
Yes, greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown. Wait a minute, what did I say? Which one are we doing today, Don? I forget. I don't think I.
My Bible.
Oh, I got the wrong one up here. Okay, can I go out and come back in? Let me see if I can do something about that. I'm going to do something right now. There we go.
There we go.
My Bible. It's guaranteed the most comfortable Bible you'll ever own. The My Bible. They're our sponsors today. Uh, our regular notices, regular legal disclaimer. Our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Barbara Pement, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. By the way, we created that for Marcia Montenegro, Barbara, just so you know.
Okay.
She was extremely embarrassed by our content here. Our regular notices: the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it, or if you really are annoyed by it and you want to inflict it on somebody else to ensure continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click on the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. This is where I would have the applause button to push right now if I had one, but I don't. Yay! Barbara Pement is our guest.
Round of applause.
Well, but I'm going to get that soon. I have to upgrade, or I have to. I don't know. I have to do some research. But there you go. Welcome,
There
Barbara.
you go.
Well,
Wherever you
thank
go.
you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Let me plug
Yeah,
myself
well,
real quickly. I
and
have a
Barb-
YouTube channel in which I am
Yeah.
on with my two sisters called Three Black Moms. We recently talked about Roe v. Wade, and it was a very dicey conversation.
Oh,
Please tune in.
I just subscribed. I'm going to do that. So
yeah.
we're glad to have you. And once you've been here, you'll know you've been had. So I stole that from
Is
Don.
this going to be bad the whole time?
It's going to be
It
terrible.
is. It is. Once we start, we're on a roll. We don't stop.
No, we're unstoppable.
Oh my
But
goodness.
it's good to laugh because we're going to talk about a subject that is can be sad.
Yeah,
Well,
it's very difficult.
that's the truth of it. There's a part of me that is. By the way, I do have some Jewish blood in my ancestry. For those who might wonder, it's not a lot, but it's enough to say
to send you to the
that I take the idea that if I didn't laugh, I would cry pretty seriously at times. I'm
yeah.
concerned about the state of the church. I'm concerned about the state of the People's Republic of Illinois, where I currently reside under Comrade Pritzker. I'm concerned about a great many things, but sometimes you just have to laugh about it in spite of all of the difficulties that are going on. So, Barb, I have known for, and Ron has known for like way more than a week.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
a few days longer than that.
Oh
Yes.
my goodness. If we start saying stuff like that, people will know how old we really are when you start saying, I've known her for 20 to 40 years, because we really do go way
Yes, we
back.
do.
we do go
Yeah,
way
Some of our
yeah.
back.
viewers were not even born when we knew each other. So
Oh
there you
my.
go.
Would you please not talk about that, please? Would you? Would you?
Well, it's important, and all of us do have some war stories, not associated with one another, but that brings us to the topic of today because we have similar sensibilities and concerns about it. I have told my story before. I became a Christian after I grew up atheist. I became a Christian after my son was born, and a group of us became believers all around the same time. Joy recommitted her life to Christ, and then we realized that since I didn't know anything about the Bible, really, I was so biblically illiterate. I would go to the Old Testament. There's this book Job. I thought it was the one ads. I mean, I just didn't know anything.
Oh
And you and you
no,
and
no.
you needed a Job at the time too, didn't
What
you?
have I got
Yeah,
myself
yeah,
into with you guys?
yeah. So, so we all kind of walked into this small Baptist church. It was a fundamental independent Baptist church that was, I would say, legalism would be a soft description of what actually transpired there. They ended up kicking us out because we had a problem with independent thinking.
Did you have long
And
hair too?
I did, and Joy wore slacks, and
Oh,
the pastor would have the pastor over during the week and have dinner, and we would raise an issue that he spoke on the previous week, and he would say, "No, I wasn't really talking about you. I'm just teaching what the Bible teaches. But if you're convicted," and then the next week he would speak on men with long hair and how that they're abomination before the Lord, and we'd have him over for dinner. He said, "No, I wasn't speaking about you, but if you're convicted," and then the next week he would talk about women who wear slacks,
if you're
so we'd have him
convicted,
over for dinner, and after a while, we got the feeling that he wasn't being honest with us, actually.
I wonder why you. I wonder why you get that feeling.
A little
Though.
Yeah,
backhand compliment.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so then at one point, he came down and he was not, he wasn't happy with something I had said in one of the Sunday school classes. Oddly, they had me teaching a Sunday school class who's
Really.
biblically illiterate. That was really weird. But he was so unhappy with what I said, he asked Joy and I to leave like immediately, post haste. And never to return. And I was not going to go to church. I was like, okay, I'm done with this Christian thing. It's just stupid. And fortunately, my wife's adopted sister was so concerned that she had paid for and then called and told us we were going to a Christian retreat with her, which I was not interested in. And she said, "It doesn't matter. I already paid for it. You don't have to go to any sessions. You can play in the snow all day for all I care. Just come
just,
anyway." And
just come.
it was transformative because we heard the speaker talking about God in a way I'd never heard before.
Is that
We
Dave
understood
Nichols?
about the love of God. That was Dave Nichols, yeah.
Yeah, he was my boss for about 5.5 years. So
Yeah.
after
So
that,
so that kind of transformed me. And then as I grew in the faith and we started getting involved with reaching out to Jehovah's Witnesses and other cult groups, we started seeing severe legalisms and false teachers in various parts of the church, and we were surprised by that. So Midwest Christian Outreach then became not only a mission to cults and non-Christian religions, but also a place where we could help those who have left churches and they are hurting and trying to figure out where can I go now and feel safe. And sometimes we don't have recommendations, so we have to kind of work with them in resolving some of these issues. In part because they've been hurt to such a degree that they really can't trust anybody else. In part because churches very often do not understand the damage that has been done and just figure like they should get over it. So how do you do that? And I
mm,
rarely, occasionally I'll run across a pastor. I'll say, would you read Out of the Cults and Into the Church? Because I have someone to send to your church and I need to know they're going to be safe there. So
You know that.
how does that align kind of with what you're talking about? You're doing a book on this as well.
Yeah, well, actually, the book goes to the publishers this week, And it's all about my experience living at Jesus People USA for 23 years. It was a religious Jesus commune. And I have to say at the outset, it was a glorious life. The title actually was that Jesus? The joy, the misery, the hurts, the healings, uh, and the miracles that really happened. There were things that went on in the 70s that were absolutely astonishing.
Yes.
And I will talk about the good and the bad and some of the ugly, because I don't think that the things that I share from my perspective is going to encompass everything that happened to everybody else. I think everybody, after they read my book, they need to get excited and write their own. I was actually inspired by Neil Taylor's book, The Great Unfixables. And Neil Taylor was a pastor. He was someone that I worked with really closely as part of our drama group, the Holy Ghost Players. And so I really got to know him in an intimate way. And yet his story is, while he is sharing some of the deep things that happened to him, they're going to be really different from the deep things that impacted me. So everyone who came out of Jesus People has a unique story that I feel needs to be shared, because there are so many aspects of our living conditions, the things we went through together, the fellowships and the deep, close relationships we had because we lived and worked with each other. And that aside, I think that the Lord allowed me to be there long enough to experience some of the joy and some of the hardship, so that when I came out of that experience, I would be able to share those things and reach out to people who were burned so badly. Not only do they want nothing to do with church, they don't want anything to do with God. And
Right.
so at my workshop that we're doing in Tallahassee, June 2nd and 3rd at the EM&R conference,
Third and
I will
fourth,
be
I think.
doing, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we're
I'm getting there on the second, but I know it doesn't start till the
but
third.
I think that I am going to be doing a workshop based on a training that I had at Bible Study Fellowship right after the big uproar that followed after George Floyd and all of the
Mm.
different racial upheavals and stories that were being illuminated in the news. We decided to have a training that would help us learn how to have empathy and compassion toward people who have been hurt, who have been damaged, who've gone through things that other people cannot even relate to. How do we, as the church, be able to implement the kind of empathy that is required? And so during the training, we had 4 people share some very deep, hurtful things that had happened to them. One person shared about a divorce. One person shared about growing up in Seattle, Washington, where their family was like the only Black family in the whole state, and how they dealt with a lot of discriminatory behavior and racism and name calling. And another person shared how they had lost a child. And another person shared how they had come out of an abusive spiritual group. So, in sharing their stories, of course, we were all moved to tears as we all spoke into their lives and said how their stories impacted us. And we watched a couple of clips that showed the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is, oh, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Empathy is when you climb into the experience with them. You step into their shoes.
Yeah.
You feel with them. You respond to them. Even if you can't say anything, you will say something like, I'm here for you. And sometimes that's all a person needs. And we are not professionals, but we were learning how to have that kind of empathy for someone who is hurting so deeply they almost can't even speak about it. And I know that, my goodness, a month ago, one of my friends lost her son in a drowning accident. He was 16. I think the
Um,
most moving thing that happened during the memorial service was that all of his pallbearers were his classmates from high school. And his name is Riley. Riley had become a Christian the December before. And I still wear his bracelet, as a matter of fact, because it's purple and purple's my favorite color. But it gives me an opportunity to share with people about this experience of having to walk through something like that. And sometimes if you've never lost a child, you cannot even fathom that kind of feeling. But just to be able to hug that person and let them know that you're there for them during the deepest, hardest experience that they have gone through. And I think sometimes church people, we've become selfish. We don't want to spend that kind of time.
Well, okay. In I have mixed feelings on this and to this for this reason. I think I think by and large, let me start with this. I didn't understand the church very much prior to becoming a Christian, and my understanding hasn't really improved since then. It's this kind of weird club that you have to admit you're a sinner to join, and then pretend the rest of your life you're not.
You're not one.
Yeah, I don't really get that. But I think that then kind of sets the tone for other things. There's this, I think, this underlying feeling that if I let somebody know who I am, they will use that against me. They will think less of me. They will whatever.
And that's what happens in abusive groups.
And that's what happens in abusive groups.
Yeah.
Now, and you can't do that with absolutely everybody all the time anyway. But there's a sense of, you lose a sense of who this person really is. So that's one level. The second level is you can empathize with those who are hurting, but not every single person. We're just limited in the emotional coinage, I guess you might use, that we can invest in somebody else. We're limited in that way. So I think God
Well,
puts
that's why
certain.
people have therapy. That's why you go to therapists.
Well, okay, I don't even want to go there because I am.
What?
I am not in favor of psychotherapy in general on a personal
you should
level.
be able. But you could say you could go to other Christians. You could go to
Absolutely.
somebody. Right.
Well,
Absolutely.
I went to therapy.
Counselors.
I went to Wellspring for 2 weeks.
Well, that explains some things, I have to tell
Well,
you.
no, you're talking about Wellspring. She went to
Oh, there you
Wellspring.
go. Yeah.
She went to Wellspring, Donna. We like Wellspring, right?
Well, Wellspring,
We do, and I've had lengthy
right
discussions with. I don't want to get sidetracked too much in this. I've
Right.
had lengthy discussions with others, even the late Paul Martin, on this issue, and oddly enough, he agreed essentially with a lot of my views. I think there's great value in counseling. It could be a trained counselor, like Ron is a biblical counselor. I think it is important to have good, sound biblical friends that are wise counselor. There's it says there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. I have a young man, well, he's not so young, who really, really, really thought he loved psychotherapy. And as we talked about it, versus the views I hold, which are more, let's see what the Bible says about this. He said, you've actually helped me more than any of the psychotherapists I've gone to, because you're dealing with what's going on with me from a biblical framework.
Mm-hmm.
You are counseling, which is true. I do believe, and Eric asked the question, Eric Pement, someone you may have heard of before. Are you in favor of counseling but not therapy? The answer to that is yes. I think counseling is very important.
Let's okay. I would refer everyone here to the book, The Triumph of the Therapeutic, which came out, I think, in the 60s or 70s. And when, the question here is, what is being healed? Therapy comes from the Greek word therapeo, which means to heal, or I heal. The world developed a model of therapy based on healing that makes you an effective person, that makes you, gives you emotional equilibrium. When we talk about healing, we're talking about healing from sin and the ravages of sin. Now, some of those ravages are, depression and things like that. Those need to be addressed. But like I talked to Larry Pyle for quite a while. He was at Wellspring when you were there, right?
Yeah, he was.
And I wasn't able to go to Wellspring. I could have probably benefited from it, but I was in Chicago. I had a job and a wife, and I was going to adopt a child. And And I talked to Larry for quite a while and various times, and Larry described some of the things that they did at Well Springs, maybe still do. One of the things is sometimes I think they had one particular course that they made everybody go through. All they did was take them through the book of Galatians. Does that sound familiar? Okay,
Right.
so that's healing. It's healing in a biblical Christian way. I don't know to what extent they might have mixed other, secular psychological concepts.
Well, I know we watched the movie The Firm, and we watched
Oh yeah.
the
I forget the firm.
one documentary.
Tom Cruise. Is that Tom Cruise, right?
That's Tom Cruise's movie.
Oh,
we watched a lot of movies that dealt with control and subterfuge and things like that.
And those can all be viewed. You can view those all as expositions almost of, is it 2nd John or 3rd John that talks about Diotrephes, who wanted to have control.
Love the preeminence, right?
Yeah, love the preeminence. Kick people out of the church for agreeing with the Apostle John and disagreeing with him, and so the world understands some things, or they understand a lot of things, and I would never say we can't benefit from it, but yeah, I hope that strikes a balance somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
well,
here's
when I hold up a book, but I'm going to hold up one.
Go ahead.
And this was great, Confronting Without Offending by Deborah Smith Pegway. And she actually covers a lot of those kind of things where you are able to bring up hurtful situations with the offending party in a way that they will be receptive. Because I think a lot of the times when you are confronting people in church authority who have hurt you, they're extremely defensive. I've seen this. And they're not open to you even confronting them about things that have been painful, to the point that when you come to them, they're so hurtful, they turn the tables on you and make you feel like, well, wait a minute, I'm bringing up this thing about you telling how you hurt me, and now you're saying that I've hurt you by telling you that you've hurt me. So
that's a standard tactic.
And then here's another book that I finished with my group. I wish I had the one that talks about a lot of hurts that she went through as a woman in the church, in ministry and in authority, and how a lot of those things that were used against her were things that we are still doing in the church to our people, which is why when people come out of a bad church experience, they don't want to have anything to do with anyone that is going to hurt them further by telling them, by gaslighting them and saying, "Oh no, that didn't happen. You misunderstood."
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear
there's this one.
Okay,
I'm on a book thing here.
You are.
Where she's talking about bridging the gap between the races, and she's a Christian, and I haven't finished her book. All these books I get from the library. I don't believe in buying books.
I understand, and I could say, I don't want to be careful here because you're a good friend. I can say that the one you just held up,
which one?
One that we would sharply disagree with.
So, this one?
Be the bridge. Yep.
I haven't
finished it yet. I have heard opinions from other people, and I'm like, wow, maybe I should finish this book before I start saying I should read it.
What I want to get to is your story leaving your group. And how you've recovered from it, and what has been the most helpful. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because I don't know if you would say this, but I would say that there's always probably some healing left to be done.
Oh, until I die, probably.
Right.
And we've been out of Jesus people 22 years now. I think the most supportive thing for me has been my husband. There are people who left Jesus people where their marriages were broken up before they even left. There were wedges. And I don't really speak about that in my book because those things happen to other people. They can share their own stories. I just share what happened to me, how I felt marginalized as a particular person in different avenues through my life. But I think the time that we left, we were looking to the future, and we were seeing how we wanted our children to have more autonomy in their lives. We wanted them to have choices like we had as individuals before we even joined the community. So I think our leaving was at a perfect time. We had spent, I'm almost 70 years old. So we're talking about,
No,
yeah.
you don't
And
look
so
it.
we're talking, thank you. It's that Halle Berry makeup. It makes you look 20
I,
years.
where do I get that?
I need to start using that.
So anyway, if I was there 23 years already, that is like if I live to be 100, like my mother who turned 99 this Mother's Day, if I live by the Lord's grace to be that long, I've still spent a fourth of my life living in community with people I grew to love and work with and cherish. But when I left, there was it was a painful process because of the pain that I actually experienced while I was there. And I think the healing part came not just from going to Wellspring, but also hearing the stories of other people who had not recovered when they left. Some of them had only been there maybe 5 years and were burnt beyond compare, So
Well, tell me what role Eric played. Tell me. Let's start talking about that. What?
well,
How did he help you?
I don't want to give away my whole book and everything,
Okay, just
but
just get
I'll
started.
just
Leave
say
the
this.
rest.
I think
Give
for
us
my
a teaser.
husband, he felt, he'd gone as far as he could go. He's reached a glass ceiling. Every place has a glass ceiling. And
At your
looking
position. Yeah.
for and was looking for different ways the Lord could use him in ministry. And I think that for me, looking at my kids and saying, oh, I don't want someone saying, we don't do college here. So, and there are just like all kinds of changes that were slowly happening over time at Jesus People. And I think one of the things that I really loved about the place was that the people there really loved God, really wanted to serve God. But there comes a time where, and you see this and you don't see it, where serving God turns into serving the organization.
Oh yeah.
And there is such a difference. There is a difference between loving and serving Jesus and loving and serving an organization that is corrupted, man-made. And that happens in every church, believe it or not just Jesus People. I mean, we have friends that were in the house church movement. And when we would share our stories together, I would say, were you there with me at Jesus People?
Right. And so,
we have the same kind of trauma.
I'd like to, if you obviously know more about the house church movement than I do, so I'm going to be calling you about that. I'd like to learn more. But would you say that, okay, you learned that serving Jesus kind of morphed into serving the organization.
Yeah.
And was it also kind of hard to distinguish between serving the organization and serving the leadership?
And this is 22 years ago. I have to say it is. I think it becomes imperceptible. I don't know, it's almost like you love God, you're serving God, but because man is corrupted and people in authority like that authority, they like that power.
Right.
It turns into something else. It turns into something that you weren't expecting. I mean, the times there were different. And there were so many Christian groups that came out of the 70s. There was a move of the Holy Spirit that moved across this country in a way that if we don't see it again, I think you're going to blow up.
And with that also went a move of authoritarianism and the shepherding movement. They kind of went hand in hand across the boards.
Yep.
And you would you know, biblically, the higher you ascend into leadership, the more accountable you become to a larger group of people. But in the shepherding movement, it's sort of like they had a different Bible. They kind of had different verses because they had this idea that they're the bosses of the church and they are therefore unconfrontable. Now, having a different Bible can be a problem, and we have a sponsor that addresses
That
that.
tries to maybe solve that problem for you. Maybe we all know that awkward feeling when someone in a Bible study says, I wish the Bible didn't have all those verses about hell, or when you're in a couple's devotion, having couples devotions, and your spouse says, I'm just not comfortable with verses that teach a traditional view of marriage. Or when you're sitting in a church and you're thinking, why do all the Bibles I read always have to agree with what conservative pastors are teaching? Well, that's why we're introducing the My Bible. It's guaranteed the most comfortable Bible you'll ever own. We've spent literally minutes creating a way that you can have a Bible that's perfect for you. You used to have to go down some dark back alley to get a Bible like this, but not anymore. You just write down all the places where you want your Bible to make the Bible more comfortable for you, and then email them to us or enter them into our handy online form. And the results speak for themselves. Yolanda from Portland says, now that I have my Bible, I never worried that my white male pastor's sermons might actually be right. Ben from seminary says, my Bible gave me the confidence I needed to drop out of my Greek and Hebrew classes. Renee from Madison says, every single one of my anti-capitalist, anti-police, and anti-social protest chants now come from the My Bible. When someone throws uncomfortable verses at you, you can always say, that's not in my Bible, available at mybible.cult. So you need to get one. You need to go out there and grab yourself a
There
copy.
you go, Barb.
Oh my goodness! I thought I had every version that was available.
You don't have my Bible, so you're right. I recently read a book by my friend Larry Eskridge who talked about the whole Jesus movement. I wish I could remember the name of it. I met Larry at Wheaton. He was at the international or the study for I forget what it was. The title is Study for American Evangelicalism, Institute for the Study of American Evangelicalism, and he covered the history of the Jesus movement, of which you were a part of. It's called God's Forever Family, the Jesus People movement. So, you were in one group that called itself Jesus People USA, but the Jesus movement, the Jesus People movement was huge,
Yeah, it was. It was amazing. There was such an attraction to that lovely hippie lifestyle where you could be a hippie but not have to be doing drugs.
And
Uh, I think
getting high on Jesus, right?
yeah, it was, and it was even in some sense on my college campus. At the same time, the Way International was also on our campus.
Yeah,
and I came out of Campus Crusade for Christ, and they warned us about those people that looked like us and talked like us, but they were not of us, and beware of those people. So there was a lot of deception mixed in with the
Right.
authentic Jesus move. We picked the name Jesus People USA because during those days, in the early days, they used to travel around in a big red school bus with Jesus painted on the side.
Yeah, but
I joined after they had
Priestley,
settled in Chicago.
Priestley's scribe points out that the shepherding movement got the wrong ideas about authority from Watchman Nee, which is true. He also impacted segments of the uh, um, fundamentalist slash evangelical church through Bill Gothard, who was influenced by Watchman Nee as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But I want to tap into the whole idyllic 70s. I lately I've been going to iTunes and downloading like the Hilltop Singers. I'd like to teach the world to sing. I mean, there was this thing going on where it was
we could do it. The three of us could do that together right now.
perfect harmony. So, I mean, we when you look at the movies, what young people were looking for, it was like, here it is. Here it is. It's this. We look for it in drugs. We look for it in sex. We look for it in rock and roll. We found it in Jesus, and
Right.
and so they're dragging all of this. They're still carrying a lot of baggage in. They don't know. that they're still carrying a lot of baggage in because they're trying to make this perfect world for themselves. And they did it in different ways. Not everybody started a commune, I don't think, but a lot of them did. And
It's
also,
because the conservative churches did not
that
recognize
was the next
that
thing I
these
was going to
people
say.
really knew the Lord, and it was like, repent and be shaved.
Right,
So if you didn't cut your hair and shave your beard,
right.
and or trim down your afro, then you weren't really, and put on a suit and a tie. You really didn't know God the way we know God. So
So,
even though there was this major move
yeah,
God moving across the country in a way that just magnified his presence, you had people who had just totally rejected it. And I think that we're in that
the
place
regular,
right now. We
yeah,
are the age of those people that did not accept
right,
Christ coming into the lives of the young people.
right. So you, yeah, Steve Brown made this observation. He said he was pastoring during this whole time, and he said, he saw this wave of young people coming to know the Lord, and some of them did come into the church, the regular institutional church, and he said there was a strange dynamic where uh, they he saw these young people, teenagers, 20 somethings, connecting more with their grandparents than they did with their parents because the grandparents had come to know the Lord just like them in the middle of their lives. The parents were raised with it, but the grandparents and the grandchildren had more in common with each other. They're more excited about the Lord, and he saw the middle generation felt kind of left out and it was a little bit resentful sometimes. But the point, though, I think you're making is really important, and that is that the church did not recognize them. They did not. They wanted them to conform. They were nonconformists. They wanted them to cut their hair. There was this college. I attended a college in the mid '80s, and there was another Christian college nearby that had it was really legalistic. We were told they had a rule against wearing wire-framed glasses.
Oh, that's crazy.
Why? Because John Lennon wore wire-framed glasses.
Oh no, stop.
And he'd been dead for 3 years by this time, but they still had the rule. The thing is, uh, unfortunately, I think the young people were right to look for something real. They were to look for something authentic, and I don't blame them for wanting to look for something that kind of fulfilled the longing for something idyllic. I don't blame them for that. It kind of underestimates just how fallen this world is when you do that. But I understand it. I felt it too. But so they go into these groups, these communes, whatever they were all kinds of different things. They cut off, or maybe they were cut off by the institutional church, but they cut off the tradition of the church. They cut off the centuries of wisdom that had accumulated to start something new. I believe in starting new things, but they didn't realize, and frankly, their parents' generation, their grandparents' generation had kind of lost it too. The tradition, the wisdom that had accumulated over the centuries, they had, we another what I'm referring to is, pretty much every mistake we are making today has been made before. I'm talking about everything from things that happen in communes to things that happen in, you name it. It's happened before. And we all have this tendency to want to start something new so that without learning from the past. Well, the church has already been here and done that, whatever it is. So when you were in the Jesus people, I don't know that they were tapping into, gee, where have communes gone wrong before in church history? Where has authoritarianism become a problem so that we can address?
I don't know if we were thinking about that.
I don't think
Actually,
anybody was.
we were just living our lives, loving the Lord, doing, what comes naturally in terms of that. But my thoughts are in dealing with people that have been burned from those experiences. How do we offer empathy, compassion,
Right.
and put them on the journey toward healing where they can rediscover the Lord again?
How did it work for you? How did it happen for you? And I don't want to give away your
Well,
book.
I
I'm going
got
to buy your
involved in a
book.
really great church afterward
Okay.
where I think it was Armitage Baptist Church in Chicago. We became members, and this is after a year of going to a different church every week, looking for a place that was going to feed us spiritually. And I think after that search, we settled on Armitage Baptist because we had dealings with them before in the past. So we knew of them. We had even visited them before. And we just felt a close affiliation with the people there and the pastors that were there. And that, I think, is what strengthened us. I think the failings of some people who have been burned, they don't find any place else. They have a desert experience. Some of my friends that I know, they've had a desert experience for 20 years.
Right. Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that just makes me sigh. I don't know what to, I mean. And I guess part of that is it's hard to rebuild trust. It's it's
Part of it
hard,
is it's hard to rebuild trust. Part of it is the state of many churches,
right?
right? So if as a church, if the leadership has this idea that their task is to figure out ways to get unbelievers into the doors to sneak up on them with the gospel, they have really lost the basic teaching on what the church is about. There's the ministry of the church, which is the very things we're talking about here. How do you, as a body of Christ, interact with each other at home? Because church is for you home. That's where you gather with the family of believers. That's where you minister to each other who is hurting. That's where you are trained biblically in how to survive in a pagan world that is adversarial to your beliefs. That's what the church is and should be doing. The gospel proclamation is to happen when you leave the building. You're ambassadors to an unbelieving world. And the church has now been trained to increase your nickels and noses, and if you do that, you're successful. It has little to do with spiritual growth and spiritual training and spiritual caring.
Well, we need a new model. I know that where we,
What's wrong with the first century model?
well, people have changed. We need, as the church, and it's not that building, we need to be knowing our neighbors, going out. I mean, the Bible says to make disciples, not converts. We're all about,
Right.
sometimes we're all
Exactly.
about making the converts.
Right.
And I think that has to change in our relationships. One of the great things I think about Jesus people, we learned how to build relationships. Of course, you live with your friends, so that was going to be easy. But even in the church where I am now, Harvest Jacksonville, we have been implementing some of the old models of going out witnessing, going out and sharing, not just with strangers, but with our own neighbors, building that sense of community. One of the great things about our buying a new house in the cul-de-sac where we live, the people who had lived there before us were believers. We got to know them before they moved on to be by their grandkids and on the islands.
Right.
And everyone in that cul-de-sac knew them because when the power went out for a week, they opened up their freezer and barbecued all of their meat for all of their neighbors. That was just something that they did. And
Wow.
so we were coming into this legacy where everyone in that cul-de-sac knew of the Johnson family here. And we are, having that opportunity to try to get to know our neighbors on a slow but very easy, relaxing relationship. We're not
Yeah.
trying to convert anybody. We are being good neighbors and sharing the gospel one on one as time allows. And I think that's an important model to
It's
follow.
if you're living the Christian life, you will inevitably have opportunities to share the gospel. If you're consciously going through life
Right.
with that as your with Christ, your relationship with Christ is your first priority, I don't see how you can avoid it.
Right.
So
We of course you haven't been on our webcast before, but I talk about this from time to time, and it comes up in our home church. My pastor and I are locked up on this. We both agree on this. And the church I'm currently interim pastoring, I've been going through this with them. And that is this: you are always discipling. our task is to disciple people into the faith. Discipleship is simple. It is observation and imitation. People observe how you live and they imitate it for good or for bad. If you're a, if you're living badly, they will observe and imitate your bad behavior. If you're living biblically, they will observe and imitate that behavior, and eventually they will come to the faith. Then, after they come to the faith, you continue discipling them in the faith. So you disciple people into the faith, and then disciple them after they're in the faith.
You're
That
talking
is the
about
church
raising your
model.
kids, right?
I'm sorry?
You're talking about raising your kids.
I'm talking about everything. Raising your kids, working with your employees if you're in business, hanging around with people in church. It is observation and imitation, everything they do. Yes, but raising your kids fits in that too as well.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
awkward silence.
I'm done.
We're letting people think about what you said.
It's like
Oh.
a Selah in the Book of Psalms. The so people are hurting. People are. I hope somebody watches this who is trying to figure this out, trying to get out of that desert you talked about, because then they can see your beautiful smile and they can see, hey, it's possible. You know, it's possible to be happy again. It's possible to be joyful. You found a good church. You
You looked for it too.
well,
Yeah.
you have to look. You can't just sit at home and
I
lick your
mean,
wounds.
here in Florida, there is a church on every corner right next to the Starbucks.
Or the Chick-fil-A. And
Yeah.
so there are places to go. And it's intimidating to visit a church. It can be. I don't know. Did you feel maybe you got used to it after a while? You're just the stranger in the
I
back
was
pew.
never intimidated by that, but part of that is just my personality. I was always a very outspoken, outgoing individual. So I was one of those people that kind of jumped first and then asked the Lord, should I have done that? So,
Worked out for you, eh?
yeah. So, and I think when you're dealing with people who have been hurt as a layperson, the most important thing is being willing to listen, being willing to let them say whatever they need to say, uh, and not judge them. I think that was one of the things that impressed me when I was at Wellspring. I could literally say anything, and there was no eyeball rolling or
Right.
any of that, like, I cannot even believe that.
Yeah.
There was like totally none of that. If I'd have said, I'm going to be a witch, they would have just listened, and counseled and just been able to let me spew forth all of the things that have been inside, just let it all out and see what happens. And I think one of the things that Christians are really good at is judging people.
Yeah.
We are so good at judging people. And,
Well,
I think we
I
need
wrote a
to be a little bit more willing to be non-judgmental.
like you. I did commit something to writing. Only I did it the year after I left my group. Um, it's still unpublished. Don has almost tricked me into publishing it in the journal or something like that. I went through and I changed all the names of all the people. This wasn't about getting anybody.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was really mainly about me trying not to, hoping that I could write it down in time so that I didn't forget what happened,
Right.
and then go back later and try to sort it out. So it's really just a straight narrative. It doesn't try to make, I guess I do probably make some evaluations here and there, but that wasn't the main purpose. And so I hope to flesh that out. My wife just told me now for 30 years, you need to put that into a full book, and maybe I'll do that. Maybe you've inspired me to do that.
And
but what
writings are going to help someone else who is struggling or still struggling. For me, it was easy because I kept diaries. I had diaries from when I was back in elementary school.
Wow.
Some of that stuff is really goofy.
Wow.
But, and then during my high school years, everything is about boys, and so there's nothing
Oh,
but
really?
guys' names. I don't even remember any of these people. And then recording things that happened while I was living in Jesus People, I would go, wow, I didn't even remember that had happened.
Hmm.
Let me write that
Well,
down. So
well,
it was nice because I had recordings of things. And then, of course, I did not really start committing to writing about those experiences until years later. I mean, I've been gone 10 years before I even thought. I mean, when I was at Wellspring and Paul Martin said, you should write a book, I thought,
this is between me and Jesus for now, right? Well, I was driving in a direction in my mind, but I'll just let you keep talking until I remember what it was, because
Well, while you're remembering, I want to mention again that Barb is doing a workshop at the Engage 2022 conference, the EMNARS conference in Tallahassee, Florida, June 3 and 4. You can go to emnr.org and look it up. The link is also in our description screen below. Ron Hensel is also doing a workshop on, in his case, Jehovah's Witnesses. And I will be doing a plenary session on the Enneagram, another severe heresy just taking over the church.
What I was thinking while you were talking was one of my discussions with Ron Enroth in '93, I think it was. He said, your book is really designed to help people from a lot of different kinds of groups.
Right.
And when you were at Wellspring, one of the things you noticed is they didn't judge you. And I would like to suggest that one of the reasons that they didn't is because they'd heard your story so many times before. They'd heard it over and over. Yours was just the latest rendition of basically the same story. And
Right.
This is what I've run into. And so there is this, I don't know, I hesitate to use the word community. It's a popular word right now, but you could look at it this way. There are all these people scattered all over the church who have been in situations that similar to the ones you and I have come out of. Spiritual, really intense. I mean, what people are calling spiritual abuse today on Twitter has nothing to do with what we went through. It's like nothing. Now some of it is, I have to admit, I've heard some pretty egregious stories of spiritual abuse. I know it's still happening, but a lot of what people are claiming as spiritual abuse doesn't come anywhere near what you and I experienced. And our experiences are so bad. I don't know about you, but this is the way Ron Enroth said it to me. You can try to explain it to somebody, and they look at you like you got a third eye planted in the middle of your forehead.
you're from another planet.
Well,
I mean, even if your whole experience was great, you're still from another planet.
Right.
It's just like people who've been raised missionary kids. And this is how I was able to relate to so many people in the house church movement. Some of them had been raised in other countries as missionary kids. And then when they came back to the United States, they had a complete culture shock. I think even my own kids, when they studied abroad and were in other countries for, several months or a couple of semesters of college, they would come back and it was a complete culture shock. Well, think how much of a culture shock it is if you have lived in an enclosed environment for 20 years. You don't have any credit cards. Your place where you live did not pay into the Social Security system. And so when you come out, it's like you've been, I remember when I got my first Sears credit card, and it's almost like I didn't exist for 20 years.
Right.
The lady says to me, where were you, in prison? I wanted to say something snarky, but
You want to see my tattoos? Well, anyways, what I was thinking also was when I showed somebody that narrative that I wrote, it's chapter length. I was working at Wheaton College, okay, and I let people in my office read it. And one of the women I was working with said, "Why didn't you just leave?" And I think that's one of the main questions that come into people's minds. You're going through all of this abuse, really. Some of it is pretty intense, and and that's part of the third eye syndrome. Why they're looking at you like you have a third. They can't relate to somebody who would endure this and just not get up and leave.
Right.
And so when that kind of links to what you said earlier about how the church is so judgmental. You come
Right.
out of these groups, and it's almost as if they treat you like you must be deficient in some area. I've had it happen over and over again where people said, well, if for you to even have stayed in it, there must have been a problem with you. Well, okay,
Right.
I don't deny that there was a problem with me. I agree, but I don't deny that at all. But
But what about the area of deception? See, that comes into
right,
play in all of this because deception can be gradual. Uh, Diane Golson, she's now passed away and gone with the Lord. She was a Jehovah's Witness for 43 years.
Yeah.
She came out, became a believer. She was part of our ministry for a long time. And one of the things that continually happened is that she would be involved in a church or give her testimony at a church. People would come up to her afterwards and say something like, "You look far too intelligent to have been in a cult." Like somehow intelligence prevents you from being deceived. I don't really understand that.
Well, that's why the Bible says that, when the Antichrist comes on the scene, the elect almost
right,
Right,
will be deceived. So it's
right,
going to be close.
right,
right. So it's this is where I think sympathy and even empathy could come in to play in the church. Um, when we escaped from the group we were in, we found a really good church nearby. It was not as
yeah,
close as I would have liked it to be. It was about a 40-minute drive during the week. It could be almost as long on Sunday. Um, Great pastor, and thankfully he understood the dynamics that were involved. He actually had met the leader of our group and didn't trust him, and his red flags were going up right away. Um, and he said, "I'm just so thankful you got out of that group." So you want to get into a church where people understand. And one of the things he did after I was there a couple of months, he said, "We've got these two ladies in our church who left a group similar to yours." And I go, "What? You mean right here in the Chicago area, right here within like a half-hour drive, there was another group similar to mine?" And yeah, it turned out there was. And they were still struggling. And he put my wife and I together with these two ladies who shared a house together. And later, one of them got married, but they were roomies at that time. And we just kind of hashed out the things that happened to us. And we found out that there were actually a couple of more people in the church who came out of the same group and found this really good church.
yeah.
Finding people with similar experiences was very big for me, because it told me I wasn't crazy. That was one of the first things. You feel like
Yeah.
I
Was
am
I
I
in the
crazy?
loony bin for those
Right.
years?
Was that and the church, and sadly judgmental people in the church will find a way to label you as crazy in a variety of ways.
Right.
One way is they might say something like, "Well, I know that guy. He wouldn't have been that mean to you." You'll hear people. Did you ever hear anybody say, "Well, I've heard all these good things about Yapuza. Why should I believe you?" I don't know if you ever heard that one, but
I actually did hear that when I was going for a job at a Christian station. They had never lived there. They only knew the good reputation.
right.
And,
I mean, I
because
go.
there was good. See, this is the thing that is
That's the
hard to
thing, right?
explain to people. They're like, "Oh, why didn't you leave sooner?" I say something like, "Well, God hadn't called us yet." But I think part of it is that because it's like the wheat and the tares, that the Bible speaks about. They're
Happens at the
meshed
end.
in together, and you will not know until the end of the age what's the wheat and what's the tares when the angels start plucking, the good fish and the bad fish. So I think that because there was good, because you had people that legitimately love God and want to do the right thing, but I think, as with all things, once corruption got in there and was not dealt with in the right way, that was the beginning of the tumbling down. No place is perfect. I mean, I have heard the same kind of stories from people that grew up or went to a conventional
Right,
church
Right.
right.
setting
Right.
and had those same things happen to them. So it's not always the organization, it's the people.
Right, right.
Right.
And it's a spectrum too. You know, I've seen spiritual abuse in most churches. It happens. And I'm talking about at the leadership level where they have done things that were spiritually abusive. The one church I was just telling you about earlier, I didn't see it at all. But then I came to the church I'm in now. And early on, I saw it. You know, it wasn't nearly to the level that I'd experienced it before, but it was there.
Right.
You
And
recognize it.
and eventually that man moved on, and we haven't had it since. Sadly, we've had more spiritual abuse from other congregation members than from the leaders. This is the thing. It can happen. You know, there was a book that came out, Well-Intentioned Dragons, came out in the early 80s, I think, and it's really a classic. It's really designed to help pastors who have been driven out of their churches by abusive members, by abusive congregations.
Right. It does go the other way sometimes. That's
Right.
the point.
You can have it in reverse. You can have spiritual abuse that is so horrendous among the people in the pews that it has driven men out of the ministry. And then you have it the way we hear it most of the time, where it's in reverse.
And then
35
there's also this book called When Bad Christians Happen to Good People by Dave Burkett.
I got to
I
write that
thought
down.
that book was so well. I was in the Moody bookstore looking for some other book, and I came across that title, and I pulled it off the shelf. I started reading it right there in the aisle. Before I was done with the first chapter, I was just livid because I could not believe the stuff that was just in that first chapter, where they were talking about how this couple had been treated because their child had a birth defect. And the way this couple was treated, I was almost crying. I was so angry just reading that first chapter. I bought that book and left the store and forgot the book that I had gone there to get. But I mean, the stories in there were just horrendous. People that are supposed to be good Christians that are damaging other people.
That is, I'm going to put that in my wish list here.
Okay. So, Barb, if anybody wanted to contact you, would they go through us to do that, or is there a different way they can?
They could, or they could go to my YouTube channel, Three Black Moms.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay, there you go.
I'm already subscribed.
So there you go. So they can go to Three Black Moms YouTube channel, and they can see you there and send you messages. And all hateful messages are ignored and deleted.
That's a good policy.
Yeah, we're so done with the mean stuff.
Yeah, well, yes, yeah. I don't bother with it usually. My common reply is, you could be right. I could be short and fat as well. The question is, am I wrong? And then we go from there. Because it's really hard to hurt my feelings. I have to like you for you to hurt my feelings.
Oh, well, that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
So there's that. So that's how you can contact Barb.
And then hopefully my book Was That Jesus is going to be out in a couple of weeks in time for the conference.
All right. And you will be at the conference, so they could come and meet you there.
And will Eric be there?
Eric will be there too.
Good going. I want to see both of you guys.
And he's also doing a presentation as well.
Yeah.
So
what's his going to be on?
And with that, I'm going to ask Ron.
What's Eric's presentation?
I think it's going to be on Islam. I think I better ask him.
Mine is titled.
No, it isn't. Our friend Sam Shamoon is doing a thing on Islam.
Sam Shamoon
my husband is doing something amazing and magnanimous. I can't think of the title right now.
But it is listed at emnr.org. The whole schedule is there, including Eric's workshop.
And mine is titled "That Dog Won't Hunt." Jehovah's Witnesses.
What's that about?
It's about the New World Translation, the Watchtower's explanation.
Okay. Eric is doing on the World Mission Society Church of God.
World Mission Society, the WMSCOG.
Yep, and it's an up and comer, and God is a woman.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my, yeah, mine too. I don't really have any goodness. I think the
God
Bible
is
says
the spirit. That is so crazy. See, people get really in fights over stuff like that.
They do. Ron, would you care to waltz us out of here, baby?
Waltzing Matilda. Okay. Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our regular resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamous. Liberal Denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys is OD Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yolande Pulley. Technical assistance comes from Mercury Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisani. Director of Privacy Assurance is Wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
It's
Never
not
happened.
going to happen. So,
and, there you have it, Barb. And now we're going to do the royal wave, so everyone knows we are
whatever
out of here.
I was told it's a figure 8. I don't know. So.
This